If I can convince you who you're not, I can influence what you become. And here's the part that bothers me. Some of us have been answering the question, who am I, with somebody else's testimony. Your father said you were difficult. Your mother said you were strong. Your teacher said you weren't smart enough. Your friend said you were the funny one. Your relationship told you that you weren't enough. Your failures told you that you were a failure. And social media asked you to turn yourself into a brand. Now, somewhere along the way, the role became the identity. Court is now in session. Ladies and gentlemen, today the state has brought a serious accusation. The accusation is simple. Your identity may have been stolen. Not your driver's license, not your social security card. I'm talking about something deeper. The definition you carry around in your head about who you believe you are. Because here's the problem with identity. You don't usually get to choose the first version. Somebody introduces you to yourself. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's success, sometimes it's rejection, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's the internet, and sometimes it's the worst thing you ever did. You make one mistake and then spend 20 years introducing yourself through it. I'm the one who messed up. I'm the one nobody wanted. I'm the one who always has to be strong. I'm the one who takes care of everybody. I'm the problem. I'm different. I'm not like them. I'm not enough. And after hearing something long enough, you stop asking whether it's true. You just start living like it is. That's our case. Now look at this. Our family role research gives us something important. The deeper story isn't simply that family roles changed. The systems creating those roles changed. Different generations experienced different pressures. For some families, survival created the hero. Work, endure, don't complain, be responsible. Then came a generation where independence became the language. Figure it out. Handle yourself. Don't expect anybody to rescue you. Then validation became increasingly important. You are special. Follow your dreams. Express yourself. And then we entered the age of visibility. Now identity isn't just something your family knows about. It's something an audience can watch. Likes, views, shares, followers, screenshots. Your identity can live online. Think about how crazy that is. You used to have a family telling you who you were. Now you can have 10,000 strangers participating in the conversation. And here's where it gets interesting. The label might change, but the mechanism is familiar. Somebody tells you what you're worth. You believe them. Then you organize your behavior around that belief. That's Exhibit A. Here's another piece of evidence. The family forecast describes the village of shared norms being increasingly replaced by algorithmic feeds and digital identity communities. The concern isn't simply that we're online. It's that relational depth can get traded for digital reach. Now think about that. You can have more followers and fewer people who actually know you. More people watching and fewer people walking with you. More opinions and less wisdom. That's a strange trade. And here's what social media does really well. It gives you immediate feedback. Post something, get approval. Post something else, get criticism. Change yourself. Post again, get approval. Eventually, you aren't just sharing your identity, you're testing your identity against the crowd. And the crowd keeps voting. Now let me bring this home. You've probably seen this family. Maybe you've lived it. There's always one kid who is responsible. The one everybody can count on. The one who handles business. The one who doesn't complain. The one who steps in when everybody else falls apart. And everybody loves that kid until that kid needs help. Because now everybody says, that's not like you. You've always been the strong one. You'll figure it out. So the child learns my value is connected to my usefulness. And they grow up. Now they're the employee who never says no, the spouse who carries everything, the friend who everybody calls, the leader who doesn't know how to rest. And everybody calls them strong, but maybe they're exhausted. That's the danger. The role worked, so nobody questioned it. Now let's cross-examine the evidence. Imagine a kid everybody calls the troublemaker. Something goes missing? Look at him. Somebody breaks something. Where is him? There's an argument? It was probably him. At first, he fights it. Then he gets tired. Then he starts thinking, maybe that's just me. So he grows up, and every conflict confirms the story. He becomes defensive. People say, see, that's why we call you difficult. And now we have a courtroom problem. Because the behavior is real, but where did the identity come from? Was the child born with the verdict, or did the environment keep submitting evidence until the child started representing himself? That's the question. Good morning. Let's step outside the courtroom for just a second and look at what's really happening. Because the 11th hour question isn't simply, what's wrong with this person? The question is, what system helped produce this behavior? Let's look. 1. What is happening? People are trying to answer who am I while receiving identity information from everybody around them. Family, culture, relationships, religion, success, failure, algorithms, audiences. 2. Why does it happen? Because labels are efficient. Hero, problem, strong, weak, successful, failure. A label takes a complicated human being and makes them easier to understand. But easier to understand doesn't mean accurate. 3. Who benefits? Now, I'm not saying every parent who called their child the strong one had some evil plan. I'm not saying every algorithm has a personal vendetta against you. That's not the point. The point is that systems work better when people become predictable. A predictable consumer is easier to market to. A predictable audience is easier to influence. A predictable person is easier to categorize. And if I can get you to say, that's just who I am, I may never have to convince you again. You started enforcing the label yourself. 4. What are we overlooking? The environment. The family role research shows that roles adapt to the systems surrounding the family. Survival produces one kind of role. Independence produces another. Validation produces another. Visibility produces another. So maybe sometimes the question isn't, what's wrong with me? Maybe the question is, what environment taught me to become this way? That's the 11th hour lens. Now, let's bring the truth into the courtroom, because understanding your environment doesn't mean you get to avoid responsibility. That's important. We don't investigate the system so we can blame the system forever. We investigate the system so we can understand what we're responsible for changing. Your role may explain you, but it doesn't own you. Your wound may explain you, but it doesn't own you. Your childhood may explain you, but it doesn't own you. Your failure may explain a chapter, but it doesn't get to write the whole book. And that's where faith changes the conversation, because Scripture repeatedly shows us that people can be misunderstood by the people around them while still being known by God. David was overlooked. Joseph was mistreated. The prodigal was reduced to his failure. Martha became so identified with productivity that Jesus had to interrupt her anxiety and busyness. The lesson isn't that circumstances don't matter. They do. The lesson is circumstances don't get the final word. God does. Last case, we talked about the mask. Tonight we're asking something deeper. What happens when the mask becomes the name? What happens when survival becomes personality? What happens when protection becomes identity? You wore the mask because it helped you survive. Maybe you became strong because weakness wasn't safe. Maybe you became funny because sadness wasn't welcome. Maybe you became independent because nobody came. Maybe you became successful because failure wasn't tolerated. Maybe you became quiet because speaking had consequences. Those strategies may have helped you, but hear me. A survival strategy doesn't automatically become a life assignment. This may explain how you survived. It doesn't have to determine how you live. The court has reviewed the evidence. Family, culture, roles, labels, algorithms, audiences, failure, fear, and the verdict is, the label does not have final authority. You are not required to spend the rest of your life defending a version of yourself somebody else introduced. If the label is true, grow. If it's a pattern, work on it. If it's a role, decide whether you still need it. And if it's a lie, stop carrying it. Because your role isn't your identity. Your wound isn't your identity. Your audience isn't your identity. Your past isn't your identity. And your worst day isn't your name. Before we close this case, let's put some equipment in your hands, because telling people to know themselves without giving them tools isn't enough. Tool 1, the road less traveled. One lesson I take from the book is this: growth often requires discipline. You don't just feel your way into a better life. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices repeatedly until the new choice becomes part of you. Tool 2, boundaries. Another useful principle. Love doesn't mean unlimited access. Healthy limits can protect relationships from becoming resentment factories, and sometimes reclaiming your identity requires learning to say no. Tool 3, the anxious generation. One of the big ideas we can take from this work is that constant digital immersion can interfere with the real-world experiences that build resilience. Translation: don't let the screen become the primary witness in your identity case. Get around people, build something, serve somebody, have conversations, sit at a table, be known. The assignment. Tonight, write down 3 labels. 1 your family gave you, 1 you gave yourself, 1 society gave you. Then, underneath each one, write, who taught me this? Then, is it true? Then, does it deserve authority? And here's the question I want you carrying into the week. Who would you become if you stopped introducing yourself through your wounds? You may have inherited a role. You may have learned a label. You may have built an entire life around it. But inheritance doesn't automatically equal identity. So don't just ask, who am I? Investigate the testimony. Ask, who told me? Ask, why did I believe it? Ask, does it still deserve authority? And most importantly, ask, who does God say I am? Because the world may have a description of you. Your past may have a description of you. Your family may have a description of you. The internet may have a description of you. But none of them get automatic authority over your identity. God gets the final word. The case isn't over because somebody accused you. The case is over when you decide who gets the final word.